All right, well, it is 10:30 here in lovely Park City on the nose, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for joining today. My name is Kelly Suzuki. For those of you that I have not had the pleasure yet of meeting, I lead our client development efforts here at AtlasRTX. I am thrilled in just a few short moments to introduce Sam Salem, our fearless leader and CEO. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We have about 30 minutes of really exciting, frankly, brand new content that we are really looking forward to sharing with you. Tips and tricks to hopefully jumpstart some of your planning and strategic ideation for 2020. If you do have questions, please feel free to actually jump into the Q&A or the chat. I will be monitoring both in real time, and we'll do Q&A at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Sam, kick us off.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I'm really excited to share some of these new tips for marketing automation using chatbots for 2020. We'll start with where we have to start, and that is the mobile phone. The mobile phone, which, as we've continued to say, is a phone, but it's not really a phone, because we use these devices now as the center of our universe. We use this for every digital media experience we have. There's no pausing, is there? Is there a pause issue right now?
No, we're good.
No, we're good, sorry about that. This device has become incredibly crucial to us all, as I think we all recognize. It's with us 24/7, and it's really transitioned the way we engage with technology. If we look at the last 20 years or so, about 20 years ago, we all remember the brilliance of moving to web applications. This concept of no longer needing to download something onto my computer. I can go to a website and engage with the website and engage with a web application to get things done. About 10 years ago, thanks to smartphones, and we'll have to call out and give some credit to iPhone in 2007, we began to get obsessed with mobile apps. Everybody was building mobile apps to augment our web experiences. Well, we now believe that over the next decade, we're entering a decade where messaging, generally, and certainly SMS, which is code for text specifically, are going to be the mechanisms by which we can get things done. So if you think about how often you now conversationally talk to your car, your device at home, candidly, how often we ask Siri on an iPhone or Alexa or other digital assistant for directions or the answer to the largest country in Africa. We leverage conversation these days to get things done, and this is going to be even more prevalent. Now, like mobile apps, which augmented the web, we believe conversation will augment the other two. But lots of new experiences will be created from this need to converse. And as many of you know, the tie to chatbots or programs that conversationally assist us is why the artificial intelligence becomes such an important component of these real-time experiences, we call them. So while this certainly applies to my generation and the generations before me, Generation X and baby boomers, it's certainly being stressed even further with millennials, and certainly now Gen Z. It's crazy to me that we've already transitioned from talking about millennials to talking about Gen Z. The first true digital natives, as we all know, those of us who have kids, they've only known this digital age. They've only known smartphones, and smartphones have been their go-to device from the very beginning. They have, I'm going to call them fast attention spans. So fast is going to be the adjective I use here. They have fast attention spans. They're very used to incredible context switching between multiple things that they do simultaneously. It also means they're not very patient, right? It has to, if it's not quick, if it's not now, I'm going to move on. And I'm proud to say that I have many of those traits myself, despite being a Generation Xer. You think about folks in this segment of our society, and it makes complete sense that the notion of normal business hours would be a really foreign concept to them. That seems so passé, that there are only certain hours within which you can engage a brand or a business. And finally, they absolutely prefer mobile and social over all other forms of communication. And as you'll see from this slide that looks at the transition that Gen Z has gone through over the last 6-7 years, you'll see that in-person has been dropping precipitously and is now actually below texting. So texting is now the preferred method that a Gen Z would like to be engaged through. The only others that have been rising, if you look at different communication channels, they're texting-like, they're conversational, they're messaging, and they are social media messaging and video chatting, both of which have seen some growth, but they're still meaningfully less prevalent than text messaging. So with that setting for Gen Z, millennials, and even Gen Xers, and our expectations of mobile, conversation, and immediacy, I'd like to present to you 10 tips that our team believes in for 2020, some of which obviously leverages chatbots for automation, and that hopefully will help you engage this new consumer that we've all become. So first and foremost, let me start by saying, as validation for our point that conversation is now augmenting apps, avoiding app fatigue is a really critical strategy that we all need to use. I think we all recognize now how hard it is, if you're not TikTok, to get someone to download your mobile app. We are more likely nowadays to delete an app than we are to add an app to our mobile phone. And in fact, when we get a new mobile phone, the first thing we do is sort of do a quick audit of which apps we should reinstall and which we should just move on from. This is in stark contrast, of course, to the fact that these messaging platforms prevalent across the world now have billions, on average a billion in each of these, but as we know, a billion is now, it's crazy to me that we can even hit 1 out of every 7 or 7.5 people on Earth on one of these platforms. But we have platforms that are in the multiple billions, and certainly text messaging is incredibly prevalent as a messaging channel. The vast majority of us nowadays are much less likely to be willing to download, as I said, and conversation and chatbots are becoming much more accepted, much more expected these days. So if you haven't experienced a chatbot, you might surprise yourself. You might have actually done it unknowingly. Chatbots are now becoming a very common approach, and messaging is becoming a very common approach for especially young people to engage, so as they can avoid having to download an app. They'd rather engage with an app that's already on their phone. The second strategy I would like to introduce to you is how to overcome fast attention spans, right? We've now recognized that immediacy in response is absolutely critical to today's buyers, today's home buyer, consumer. It doesn't really matter the vertical. We now want immediacy. And in fact, we're finding empirically through our own work that the average user is willing to have an attention span or level of interest that doesn't last more than about 6 seconds. After about 6 seconds, it's time to move on. After about 6 seconds, the thought of sitting there waiting for something to happen in a live chat or in some other engagement is incredibly difficult for especially a young person. So believe it or not, 6 seconds is about the amount of time that we are willing to wait, and that's dropped more than half again as it was in the year 2000. For those who are interested, the attention span of a goldfish is purported to be 9 seconds. This is not our own empirical research. We have had nothing to do with this, but we have shorter, or shall we say, faster attention spans than a goldfish. The third strategy is we need to engage prospective customers, prospective buyers their way. Yes, we absolutely prefer one-to-one communication. Certainly Gen Z prefers online communication than in-person communication. I think that's intuitive to most of us. And the vast majority of millennials nowadays, as well as Gen Z, would prefer to text. And I, for one, as a Gen Xer, will tell you the same thing, that I prefer text messaging over, oops, sorry about that, over phone calls or in person. Well, engaging their way. Number 4 is engaging on their time. So again, this notion of 24/7 as an expectation and normal working hours or normal business hours being a bit foreign is really key here. We're actually finding now, with large volumes of conversations being handled on our platform, that in many cases, more than half of the conversations are happening after hours. More than half. So we have to find a way to engage these prospective buyers when they want to be engaged. 2/3 of internet users today say that 24 hours is sort of the best reason why they would love to accept engaging with a chatbot. Hey, give me a chatbot if it means I can do this anytime I want to. And we expect it. I'm going to stop there, but the notion is 24/7 is absolutely critical to today's consumers. So I think you're certainly seeing the message of where we believe chatbots can interplay, but we even believe that they can interplay from a customer experience, which brings us to a perspective, which brings us to number 5, leveraging AI chatbots to meet modern expectations. So to meet our frustrations as modern consumers dealing with today's websites, whether it's that the site is too hard to navigate, or I can't get the answers, or it's too long for me to find information, we can have a chatbot that deals with that and that remediates that frustration for a prospective customer. Poorly designed smartphone apps or services that are not working on my mobile phone, we can have a chatbot that works either over text or over web chat that can remediate this problem and can allow them to have that modern experience and modern expectation. And finally, believe it or not, even the notion of services feeling impersonal, we can create sufficient identity and sufficient personality, and we'll talk about that in a few more slides, with a chatbot to ensure that the experience feels personal. It's not a human, we recognize that, but it can absolutely be a personalized one-on-one experience. This is between me and this brand on a one-on-one basis, and not a mass approach, mass email that's coming to me and 5,000 other people in almost exactly the same format. I alluded to this earlier, but I want to stress it again. Our philosophy, and hence our tagline as a company, is chatbots and humans are better together. And this is where I want to get very transparent and tell you that even we, as a provider of chatbot programs, will acknowledge that chatbots are awesome, but they cannot replace a human. They cannot fake being human. If we want to stump a chatbot, you will absolutely stump a chatbot. But as I continually say, but if you're trying to get something done, you will absolutely get something done with the chatbot. So our philosophy is chatbots are awesome. Let's have them serve as digital assistants to humans. Let's have them make us more efficient. Let's have them do the things we don't want to do, or we can't have the capacity of doing. So, for example, if I want to engage people in 40, 50, 100 languages, pretty hard for me as a human to do that. A chatbot, on the other hand, can in fact engage in multiple languages in real time. Chatbots are specialists, so certainly we can't configure general purpose chatbots. We build chatbots for specific use cases and specific portions of a customer journey. If the prospective customer wants to come out of that portion of the customer journey, absolutely, we believe human engagement at that point makes absolute sense. But again, chatbots are effective at things that we may not be as desirous of doing. One common use case, and we'll allude to this a little bit later, is sales follow-up, or collecting information from a prospective customer, or finding out the status of something. Why not automate that on behalf of the human sales agent, the human marketer, any human within our organization that wants some aspect of their role automated. And I'll stop there, but we'll talk a little bit more about this use of chatbots to qualify prospective buyers and exactly when it makes sense to engage. In fact, it's right here, number 7, using chatbots to automate both follow-up and qualification. So the prospect of engaging buyers and finding out who the real buyers, who are the qualified, interested buyers for me as a salesperson to engage and spend my time and invest my time in. So I'm not annoying those who aren't interested. I'm also not wasting my time on those who aren't interested. I can really focus on the specific segments of my prospective buyer base. One of the interesting research that we found on our own data, looking at over 4 years of conversations now, is that in some of our programs that use a quantitative number of 0 to 10 to allow a prospective buyer to self-qualify, and I hope I can elucidate how cool and how impactful this information is, we found that those who self-qualify at a 0 to 6 score will convert to a buyer on average 1 in 1,000 times. So 1 in 1,000 times if they self-qualify with an interest level of 0 to 6. What's crazy is that rises 100-fold if they self-qualify as a 9 or 10. So what we're basically doing is, hey, Mr. Salesperson, you're welcome to try to find 1,000 of these 0 to 6s to try to close one, or you just need 10 of these 9s and 10s. Why not invest your time on those who are expressing their interest very explicitly to you? And this has been a really effective way to leverage chatbots as a digital assistant. Number 8, and this becomes a bit imperative as we talk about strategies for implementation. The next 2 slides along with this one cover that. It's really important for the chatbot program, what we call a real-time experience program, to be part of and consistent with your overall marketing strategy. So you have an overall marketing strategy that talks about your audience and goals and performance of your programs, identifying the key intents and how you want to tell your story and the strengths, and you want to collect feedback. You've got your strategy, and the chatbot or real-time experience program has to fit within that strategy and be consistent with it. And in fact, we talk about the chatbot as number 9, the chatbot's identity having to be consistent with your brand voice. Many of you have done an exercise like this where you've identified where your brand fits on various dimensions, whether you're serious or playful, whether you're a rebel or conventional, and so on. Many of you have done these exercises, and we recommend going through exactly that same process as we define the chatbot's identity. So some of the interesting things we found include the fact that my team has now discerned very empirically that female names, we prefer female names for chatbots. And in fact, we prefer female names with 2 syllables, not 1 or 3. So it's really, it's a sort of an interesting factoid here, but around the brand, picking a name, picking an identity, preferably female with 2 syllables. We do, just to be clear, this is a common question, we do endorse and promote that we always be authentic in our conversation, and that the icon is that of a chatbot, a little robot-like looking icon to really indicate that, hey, we're being transparent with you. This is not a human. I'm not trying to fake being Jane or John. This is a robot, and robot in your brand is able to help with a large number of topics, but robot can be backed by a human. And finally, we do have an innate desire to feel like we're engaging something that is not completely systematic. So we actually love to be consistent with your persona and give the chatbot a little bit of an identity, whether it be rebellious or playful or serious. We love adding a little extra bit of emotional connection to the consumer experience in the chat. So it's okay to say things like, "Silly Billy, you can't ask for an appointment yesterday," or things like that, as long as, of course, they are consistent with your brand. And then finally, again, strategically, to make these programs successful, stakeholder buy-in is absolutely crucial. And there we start with involving executives. We found it to be absolutely critical that executives are not just the buyers, they're not just the signers on the agreements, that executives have to see the data and hear from their customers, hear what's going on, be an oversight for these chatbot conversations that are happening. And let me tell you, the extent and degree of analytics that we're now able to do about your business from the conversations is really staggering and improving every day. We do believe in pilots. Believe it or not, we don't try to roll programs out in large scale. We recommend you do the same thing. It's fantastic to pilot programs in a very targeted way with early adopter folks within your organization. Start there. Prove it out with those early adopters, make them incredibly successful, and have them serve as champions for everyone else. None of us want to be forced to use a new technology. These things are very new technology, and let's leverage those who are already early adopters within the organization. Explaining the why we found to be completely critical, and we urge you to do the same thing. People want to know why we're introducing new things, why this technology is going to help me as a member of the team. And obviously, communicating and celebrating successes is absolutely critical. We certainly celebrate here internally. You know, there have been many meaningful moments for me, as I remember. You know, the first conversation that turned into an appointment over the platform, the first time that a customer committed to purchasing over the platform. These moments are really important and really worth celebrating for the team. And with that, I hope that gives you an idea of some of the tips that we would love to recommend for 2020. And with that, I'm just going to give you one example of a case study from a live customer, and this describes the customer situation. Just a quick summary of this. So this customer was a home builder, and the client wanted to increase post-model home visit engagement and follow-up. It's a problem many home builders run into. How do I engage a customer after they've left my model home and not purchased? Additionally, revisiting recently aged prospective and active buyers to find out, are you still interested? Do you have objections I need to address? Or if you've bought elsewhere, where did you buy? So I can learn about why I lost this customer to a competitor. So this client wanted to understand this information. There have been additional use cases, from inviting folks to new community grand openings or engaging realtors and communicating specials, to critically reducing the time to purchase and improving the home buyer experience. And nowadays, as we talked about earlier, no one wants to receive 6 voicemails over a 3-week period and 18 missed phone calls from a salesperson. They'd much rather go through this comfortable experience. So this client wanted to create this modern, comfortable experience. And finally, and this has proven to be incredibly useful, especially in metro areas, providing a means for non-English speakers to engage. Some of you have seen some of our stats that on the order of 10% to 13% of home buyers these days are foreign buyers, not just foreign speaking, but foreign buyers. And this is obviously higher than that in metro areas, and maybe a little lower than that in non-metro areas. But suffice it to say that a chatbot can serve as a digital translator, as an interpreter for a marketing or salesperson to allow them to engage those prospective buyers. And the results were absolutely compelling. So SMS engagement and website engagement absolutely allowed both inside and outside sales teams to engage much more effectively, much more easily, and much more naturally with prospective buyers, whether they be an early in the funnel lead just visiting a website or someone who's visited a model home. But candidly, we've also found that the data itself and the real-time analytics have been equally meaningful to executives and to management, because they're actually able to adjust and orient and reposition their products, their offerings, and even their processes based on this real-time data. In this particular case, we had a very meaningful increase in buyers that we were able to qualify on the website with this client. The conversion from lead to an appointment increased by 3/4, which is very meaningful. And certainly the reduction in time and the convenience for salespeople was very meaningful, roughly 50%. So you take a 6 to 8 week sales cycle and reduce it to 3 to 4 weeks. And with that, I hope that was concise and a bit quick, but I hope this covers some interesting information for you guys for 2020. And with that, I'll turn it back to Kelly for some Q&A.
Great, thanks, Sam. If you'll repeat the questions, we have half a dozen or so that have come in so far.
Great.
The first being, can you talk about, this is a compounded question, best practices for human engagement with chats, and then in follow-up, % of chats where human engagement is often required.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So the question was, best practices for engaging the human into a live chat initially powered by a chatbot, and how often, what percentage of the time that's necessary. Now what's interesting is that this is a compound answer, but I'll try to keep it brief. It really depends on the use case. So we found that if your use case is very early in the funnel, if you have someone who did a Google search and landed on your web page in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., they're actually more inclined, and believe it or not, our research shows that in many use cases, 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. is in the top few hours of visitor traffic. But suffice it to say that that user is much more likely comfortable to engage an automated bot to get a few questions answered. The last thing they want to do is engage a human. So certainly if a human is awake and you want to try to engage, please do, but we'd actually recommend letting that early stage process take care of itself. And then the human can serve as the follow-up after the fact, once the customer has indicated their interest. However, if we go further into the funnel, and now you've visited the model home and you've engaged with a salesperson, I actually don't want quite as much automation. If anything, I want the automation to be minimal, very quick, and then I want to be able to speak to the customer rather quickly. So to answer the second part of the question, we found that it ranges sincerely from 0% of the conversations needing humans because we're trying to do something very autonomous, all the way to, candidly 50, 60, 70%. If you're doing a customer service use case, it may be a little higher than that. But in most cases, it's 1/3 to 50% of the time where we want to engage the human. We want the human salesperson to take on the relationship and move it forward.
Thanks, Sam. I think to that point, can you dig a little bit more into the 1 to 10 data that seemed compelling to one of our attendees? Okay, so can you share just a little bit more context on where that comes from?
Yes, fantastic. So let me repeat the question. Thank you, Kelly. The question is, can you elaborate a little bit more on the 0 to 6 and 9 and 10 program and how we devise that? So we run programs that do post-sales meeting follow-up, post-model home, for example, in the home building use case, follow-up to gauge interest and to qualify a buyer so we can realize whether or not we want to bother them, whether they are interested in buying or not. And now that we have data over a 4-year span from tens of thousands of engagements with the chatbot, we have very statistically relevant numbers to tell us that when we as a consumer say that our interest level is a 5, for example, that I am now 1 in 1,000 likely to convert to a buyer. If I tell you I'm a 5, you can certainly try, but it's going to take 1,000 of me to convert me to a buyer. Whereas our statistics have shown, and this is really interesting because those of you who've been our clients for a while may know that we initially used to use 8s, 9s, and 10s to indicate buyers. We've now found that it's really the 9s and 10s that are statistically indicative of being a very, very serious buyer, and that 8 actually drops substantially. If we're a 9 or 10 in self-assessing our interest level, we're a 1 in 10 likely to actually buy the home. So that's a 100x difference between segments, the first and second segments. And that is very meaningful to a salesperson who can now really focus their time. After all, that was one of the key objectives of a program like that. Let's figure out who the real buyers are. Let's not bother the others. And let's give a great experience to those who are interested.
Thanks, Sam. The next one from one of our friends who's really close to web analytics. Are we able to mine data from the questions that are asked in order to find opportunities to improve website content to better address visitors that they're not easily finding? So are they using chat as a search function and feature, and how do we dig into that data? That's
a fantastic question, and candidly one where we've really evolved our position on it, because for marketers and digital analytics gurus out there, web analytics still exists and is still important, because we have to understand jointly what's happening on the website, where people are arriving, where they're going, what their experience is like. But then we transition to and link with the conversational analytics, which is sort of now the new modern version of web analytics. And that is the study of where are the conversations going? Where are people, what are people asking about? Where in the conversation are they falling out of the funnel where we don't want them to? And where are they going through, and how can we optimize? And absolutely, those analytics we can do in conjunction with your existing web analytics tools. So there's existing great web analytics tools for that, but our team provides the conversational analytics and works to continually refine that experience. One quick 10-second comment, I'll say that we've now figured out that marketers especially feel the same way about web chat conversational messaging as they do the website. About 2 weeks after the website's launched, it's no longer good enough. The same applies to conversational programs with chatbots. We constantly refine and optimize them because marketers you're never happy with it, right? We're always wanting to improve.
Awesome. 2 more questions, and please feel free to hop in if anyone else has anything else they'd like to ask. Are there hiccups that you see with language translation and in your chatbots at all? Are there inconsistencies in the way that it translates, and how do we avoid anything sensitive?
Fantastic. The question is, are there translation hiccups? How do we deal with them or avoid them? And the answer is absolutely. From time to time, there's going to be a hiccup, because let's be candid, as I alluded, chatbots are not humans. Chatbots are programs. And now some might say, wait a minute, humans make mistakes too, which is true, because there's a sort of a counterbalance between the two. What's great about a chatbot is it's predictable in its response. It'll always give you the same answer when you ask the same question. Whereas a human doesn't have that consistency. They could be having a bad day or whatever. The same applies to the ability to speak foreign languages. The chatbot will always translate in the same way. In some cases, it will make a mistake, and we optimize and refine that. Now, to the second part of the question, the good news for us jointly is that because conversational messaging is typically quite concise and quite brief, computers are really, really good at translating short segments, fragments. We're not talking about prose, we're not talking about poetry. 2 things that computer machine translation, it's called, machine translation has not really nailed. But expressions and sentences, when can I come in? what is the price, those sorts of expressions, computers are very, very, very good at translating. So I would say if we were to quantify the quality, it would be 95% of the time or more, the translation is correct. The remaining 5%, it's pretty close. So it's not like we're off completely.
Brilliant, thanks, Wissam. The last question, are there variants in chat engagement across generations?
Really, really good question. The candid answer is there are two segments of chats. We found, I'm sorry, I have to repeat the question. Are there variances in chat engagements across generations? The answer is on the segment of outbound, we have run many, many programs to engage outbound segments. And we have many clients with, for example, 55 and over communities. And then those who have entry-level homes. And believe it or not, we found response rates to be insignificant, the differences to be insignificant, maybe a 5 or 10% difference. Without sounding ageist, I think perhaps at 85 or 90 or 95, there might be a drop-off. But candidly, today's 75-year-old is texting with her or his 50-something son or daughter and 20-something grandkid and so on. So texting has become, and messaging has become very prevalent. On the inbound side, we have not yet collected enough data to be statistically confident in our recommendation. So please give us a little bit more time. We'd like to give you facts that are founded in empirical data. And we suspect that there will be a little bit more of a variance there. Because today, young people are absolutely used to clicking on a chat icon and very quickly getting what they want done because they have no patience for it. Whereas an older person, to them, that might be more an indication of talking to a human. So give us a little bit more time. We suspect it'll be a little bit larger, but still, today's use cases for us cover every generation, and we're getting a lot of success across all generations.
One last question that's come in.
One last question.
So the chatbot helps to address a website visitor's impatience. When the handoff happens to the human and they can't be quite as quick and quite as immediately responsive, do we add dissatisfaction into the experience because the human now isn't engaging as fast? Or are they further along in the funnel, so it's okay?
Very, very good question. So the question is, if we're engaging on the website and the human tries to jump in but can't get there quickly enough, is there dissatisfaction? And the answer is we need to design the program jointly to account for the appropriate use case. So as I mentioned earlier, if this is a customer service use case, and let's keep it to home building and say I've moved into my home and I am reporting a problem with my home. If the chatbot doesn't understand that and says, hey, thank you, I'm sending that to a human, and a human needs to jump in, and takes 2 minutes, I'm going to be a lot more patient because I want to talk to a human. I'm not going to close that window. 2 minutes might be pushing it candidly, but I might be a little bit more willing to sit there and wait to talk to a human. Having said that, absolutely the question is very astute. If I'm trying to engage a chatbot because I landed on a website and I'm just asking 2 or 3 questions like, do you build homes in Denver? Do you have anything under 500K? And then I ask a question and it takes me a little too long. In our experience, for the human to jump in and answer, in our experience, it's less about dissatisfaction and more about abandonment. I'm much more likely to say, that's fine, I'm just going to move on and close. So what we actually try to do to deal with that is to say, hey, thank you for that question. I don't know the answer, but can I get your contact info to allow a human to engage you? And we actually run those programs typically much more autonomously, where we try to take the online experience that's very, very real time, capture the information, and then hand it off to a slower paced communication channel, like texting instead of web, which then allows the human to create a much better experience for the customer.